Hello, everybody. It is me, Michael Whitehouse, the guy knows the guy, and over here? Yes, I think I point. Over here is Carole Mahoney with Unbound Growth. Hello, Carole.
Hello, Michael and everyone.
Oh, so of course you are here because you are going to be one of our speakers at Conference21.
Yeah, I am so excited.
Yep, you were on my podcast last week. So people may have heard that, and I did see that shared many different places, especially across Twitter. So tell the folks who didn't hear the podcast a bit about yourself and who you are and why they should be excited to see you there.
So a little bit about me. I own a sales coaching firm called Unbound Growth. And as you can tell from the T-shirt, we actually teach and coach on a model that makes it all about the buyer, all about the other person. And with that, we also take into account that sales is not just a numbers game, it's also a mental game. So we really dig into what are the mindsets and beliefs that are either helping or hindering people's skills in being able to get more customers, more clients, which is something that every entrepreneur who I've ever spoken to says that's some of the things that's on their mind is how to get their first customer or their next customer.
Mm-hmm. And so you were telling me about the shirt and how it's upside down and
Yeah. So a lot of the conversations in the coaching that I do with salespeople and with entrepreneurs, I found myself keep repeating this. It's not about you. It's not about what you think, about what you want, about your features, about your product, about your service. It has to be all about the buyer and their problems and how they perceive them and what they've tried and what's worked and what hasn't and what they think the solution should look like. In other words, it has to be all about them. And it's so easy to default back to what we think because that's just how we're wired as humans to look after our own best interest. Except that it inhibits us from being able to clearly see and help the other person, which is what buyers are looking for, which is why buyers find it hard to trust people who are selling them. They don't want to feel sold to. So the shirt is a reminder to anyone, really, entrepreneurs, salespeople, I've given them to family and friends, as you can imagine, that we need to focus on the other person first. It takes a conscious effort. We need a daily reminder. And when my clients would say things like, I need to put this on a Post-it note or something like that, I'm like, we all need the daily reminder. So hence the T-shirt. And really the mission of what we're trying to accomplish in sales training and coaching is to shift that perspective of sales being icky and yucky into one that's helpful and collaborative and trustworthy. So that's really what I'm going to be talking about at Conference 21 is sort of my own story of how I had to shift what my mindset was about sales in order to achieve my own business goals and personal goals, and how that ultimately helped me to understand what the needs of my buyers were at a greater extent. So we're going to be talking about what are some of the common misconceptions about sales, what are some of the things that get in our way, and as well as how do we start changing these mindsets and beliefs that many of us have had for a lifetime. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yep. Yeah, and I love what you're saying about focusing on the other person. One of the most effective sales strategies that I learned, and honestly, when I learned that strategy, when I really got into coaching, is a strategy in which we get to the third call before I have told them anything about what I do. Now, they probably know what I do because they're looking at my Facebook, looking at my LinkedIn, they're watching my videos. There's all this background they can go get. But it's all about them. What are their goals? What are they trying to do? Do they want help with what they're trying to do? And it's not until we get very close to the end where I say, here's how I can help. Before that, it's just, would you like some help? Yes, I would. Okay, here's the next step. And people, and it's amazing because people just go along with it. You'd think they'd say, well, what are you going to do for me? What's this about? How's it going to work? Nope. They just assume it's probably going to work and just keep riding right along because I'm just talking about them.
Yeah. And it seems really simple, right? But when you're in that moment and when you're under the pressure of either making a quota or making the rent or the mortgage or whatever payment that month as a small business owner, it's that pressure that can cause us to start to slip back into that pushing of ourselves because we're worried about things. It's normal and it's human. Hence, again, why we need the reminder. We have to figure out how to make that conscious effort to be able to put that pressure aside and be focused on the other person. And, there's lots of studies that show. I had an interview a couple of weeks ago with a friend of mine, David Hoffeld, where we both dig a lot into the science and studies of sales. But there are actual studies that show that when we're under that kind of pressure and we're getting sort of emotionally wrapped up in things and in our head, it actually is something that buyers can sense. Like we can sense when we meet that person at the networking event or the cocktail party, and within the first 30 seconds, they've talked all about themselves. And they'll probably have even walked away from the conversation without asking you a single question about you. We know what that feels like, but we slip back into it when we get into that sales role. And because that's what we perceive salespeople to be, and because that's a negative thing, it just happens. So again, it takes that conscious effort. So I'm excited to share some strategies with people, some things that they can do in their day-to-day to start to overcome this.
Yeah, awesome. And I think it's especially important with highly competitive or commoditized industries, insurance salespeople, car sales, some kinds of marketing. I talk to people all the time and I say, what do you do? And they give me this, I'm a blah, 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 blah. And I could literally, they could have cut and pasted that from one of the competitors.
Yeah.
I'm a web designer, SEO expert, and social media consultant. Okay, cool. What do you do? Oh, I make websites that convert sales, and exact same, like the verbiage just copied from someone else. And if instead and of course, for me, I'm not a potential client, but if they, instead of saying what they do, say, well, tell me what you need, tell them about your goals and how you can achieve them. And then, because that differentiates automatically. Because then it's not, I'm me, it's you've got your problem and here's a solution to your problem. And I'm the only person who's presented a solution to your problem.
Yeah.
Solution to my problem is I need more money.
It's exactly like, and I think it's something that we do prevalently in the United States anywhere, where we're so focused on what it is that you do. One way to flip that script when someone asks you what you do is to be able to say something along the lines of, I help frustrated entrepreneurs who are struggling to find their first or next customer, have tried everything, but don't realize that it could be their own mindsets that are getting in their way of doing it. I'm not telling you exactly all about me. I'm still making it about the person that I help. And if you're at a networking event or you're asking for referrals, that's how you're going to help people to remember who you help, because they can see that and recognize that in the world. I can't see and recognize when somebody needs SEO on their website, like unless I'm searching for their website and can't find it. All right, maybe that's an example. But the point is that you can make it still all about your buyer without having to say what it is that you do. And to your point, those that are, if you're selling insurance or you're selling services and it's essentially the same exact thing that everybody else is selling, the only way that you're going to differentiate is if you differentiate in how you sell. It's not about what you sell, it's about how you sell. And if you're asking questions to uncover, help people think differently about their problems, get a different perspective on it, you can get your buyers to say things like, I never thought of that before. That's when you're adding value. And when you're making it all about them versus all about what you do. It also takes some of the pressure off you, doesn't it? Like it's a lot easier. I find it a lot easier to ask people questions about themselves than for me to try and figure out what's the perfect thing for me to say right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I sold cars, one thing that I did, and I kind of did it instinctively because it made me more comfortable, was I had a set of questions that I would ask to start to, and car buyers aren't used to that because they're used to the aggressive salesman who's not interested in what they want, but what they want to sell. And so they come in armed with, well, I'm going to come in, I'm going to look at the Forte and then get out, and I'm going to control this. But they don't know enough to control it. And by sitting down with them, and so sometimes they resist, like, well, I just want to look at the car. I'm like, okay, cool. We'll look at the car. You're the customer, you're the boss, do what you want to do. But then once I kind of let them wander around and be like, you want to actually talk so I can point you in the right direction now? But with many customers, they like to be guided and like to be led. And so I say, come on over, let me ask a couple questions. What are you looking for? And with cars, it's pretty simple. There's 5-6 options on the lot, and it's a simple set of Boolean questions, how many kids do you have? What are you using the car for? Whatever. But they feel like they're understood now. And I asked them 5 or 6 questions, and they got to go on about, whatever it is they need and their kids and their job and whatever for 10 minutes. And now they feel like I really care about them. And so my closing ratio was higher than a lot of other salespeople because, or they leave and go shop around and come right back because they encountered the high pressure salesman like, here's a car, buy it because it's got wheels. And
it's blue.
Yeah, because I opened with them, and not talking about our dealership has been in business for 27 years, and we've got blah, blah, blah. I started with, what are you looking for the car for? What's most important to you? Those kinds of questions. And it built a great rapport because now we're talking all about their favorite subject, them.
Yeah. Now, if you think about how car buying, I don't know how long ago it was that you sold cars, but if you think about how people buy today, a lot of people may have heard the stat that if you're in B2B, that B2B buyers are about 70 or something percent through their buying process before they ever talk to a salesperson, because there's so much information available on the internet. You're buying a car today. I mean, I actually do need to buy a car, but I already have an idea of what it is that I want. So now my search involves finding which is the right model, and then where is it so that I can go and get it. I'm not so much going into the dealership, especially now with the pandemic, and spend a lot of time talking to a salesperson because it's not my favorite thing to do. But like most buyers today, they're going to go online to look up more information. And if you're not, they're going to your competitors' websites that do SEO and website design and copywriting and what have you. And if you're not able to differentiate both on the web and in your sales conversation, it's making it harder for them to make a decision. Ultimately, our job as salespeople is to help people make decisions on what to buy that is in their best interest. That's how we avoid the idea of buyer's remorse. So when you think about the car buying experience, if I'm going online and I'm looking at all of these different models and I'm comparing and looking at and consumer reviews and all of that, and then I walk into your dealership and I say, all right, this is what I want to look at, and you're not able to add more value or help me to differentiate what in the information that I've read is important and what's real and what's not, then I'm going to treat you like a commodity. That's the challenge that a lot of us have in sales, is how do I add more value than the web does? If you can't figure that out, then that's going to make it harder for you to differentiate from your competition and add value in any exchange that you have with buyers.
Yeah, well, I was telling you recently, it's 2015, 16, 15, somewhere around there. So they were coming in they thought they were coming into all the information because they'd done all the research. But it's amazing how people who've done 10 hours of research still know less than they did when they started. Yeah, they'll come in and they'll have heard about the I was selling Kias. The Rio is their subcompact. It's about the size of a refrigerator box, but it's really cheap. And so they'd be like, "Oh yeah, the Rio looks really great." And I'd say, "Okay, cool." They'd say, "Oh yeah, we got 3 kids. We often go camping. We like to carry a lot of stuff." I'm like, "The Rio? Are you sure you mean the Rio?" Yeah. And then, but I'd ask all the questions, and they say they want to see the Rio. I show them a Rio with the next step in my back pocket, because I know, because I've asked them the questions, they're not going to like it when they actually put their hands on it. But as opposed to another salesman might say, "Oh, you want to see a Rio? Okay, cool. Here it is. Boom." And then they'd be confused when they say, "Oh, why disappointed?" Yeah, it's too late to have that conversation when you're standing at the car, when you're talking about price, when you're talking about those guys. You got to get that information up front, even if they think they know. And of course, you don't want to say, "I don't think you really know what you're talking about from the internet." You have to credit.
The worst thing that you can do is start making them feel stupid off the bat.
Yeah. I love an educated consumer. It's so great to do all this research. Let's take a look at that. And one thing you may not have seen online is it looks a lot bigger in the pictures, or something like that. But I'll show you that. I also have another idea, but it's totally up to you if you want to even look at it. If you want to look, it's up to you. But give them, again, creating that value and
asking more questions, right? Yeah. So a lot of times with salespeople will ask a question. I'll give you just an example of, I work with a company and they sell CRM systems. And so when I ask the sellers, when buyers come to you, what's what we call the compelling reason for them to make a change? What's driving this? Well, they need a CRM system. They don't have a CRM system, so they use Excel spreadsheets. Okay. That's not a compelling reason for them to want to buy a CRM system just because they don't have one. Like in the example of the car, if someone says, "All right, I want this, I'm a Toyota. I have Toyotas in the past. I want to get this Toyota RAV4. I go camping a lot. My kids have all of this football gear." If I were to go into that dealership and say, "All right, I want the RAV4. I already know that it's got the all-wheel drive option, which I'm going to need, and it's got the space in the back and the seats can go down." Now, that salesperson that says to me, "All right, so you said that your kids play football and that you go camping a lot. How much gear does that take up? How much space does that take up for you? And then when you go camping, what's the size and weight of the thing that you're pulling? And, not only that, but then what other gear do you have on top? Are you envisioning being able to put stuff at the top?" By asking questions like that dig down further, then when I say, "Well, yeah, I've got this much space in that," and then a salesperson can say, "Well, did you realize that the RAV4, if you put those 2 seats down, that you really only have X amount of cubic space? Do you think that's going to be enough to hold all of your stuff?" By asking questions rather than telling them the answer, they feel like their opinion matters. And then when I'm going to say something like, "Oh, I hadn't really thought of that. What other options do I have?" Now I've asked you for the information versus you trying to say, well, this is what you should do.
Yep.
Okay. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. That's to say to anybody at a dealership, especially a woman, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I was always very cognizant of that as well, especially working with women, to make sure that I'm here to help. This is your show. I'm your tour guide. I know where if nothing else, I know where the keys are. And I'd have some people that come in and they're like, I want to look at 6 different cars. Great, we'll look at 6 different cars. Never showed anyone 6 cars. Never got past the 3rd one. But they're thinking, I want to look at this and this and this and this and this. And as we're going, I might ask a couple questions and let them kind of guide them, zero themselves in, and okay, so you want to look at the Rio and the Rio's a tiny one, the Sorrento's the big SUV. You want to look at the Rio and the Sorrento? Okay, sure, great. Here's the Sorrento. Do you think anything smaller will do for you? No, probably not. Well, there's nothing small, nothing bigger, so you go to 5 options. I can show them to you, but you will see they're smaller. But let them take control.
Yeah, and all of this seems like, I'm sure people are listening to this right now and say, oh yeah, of course, that makes total sense. That's totally what I do. But if you think about it and you're truly honest with yourself, you get into your sales conversations and it's your paycheck on the line, are you really able to do those things, to take that step back, be in emotional control enough to be able to not jump into or react to the first thing that you say? I see this happen a lot when we start talking about price and money and budgets, that's where a lot of people freeze up. I actually I have a show called What Sales Can Learn. We do a monthly show, and we just are releasing an episode where we talk about salespeople, like professional salespeople. 60% of them are uncomfortable talking about money. Now, if you think about the fact that, we'd rather talk about religion, sex, or politics before we talk about money. It's the number one reason why people get divorced. Be a surprise, but if you think about how that plays out in our sales conversations, if you're not comfortable talking about money and its uses and its impacts and how to find it and leverage and use it, and your buyer's not comfortable talking about it, then that's going to become a major problem when you start uncovering issues that they need to solve and the consequences of not solving it and the opportunity gained by solving it. It's going to be hard for you to then have a real conversation there. So there are a lot of different mindsets and beliefs and things that are going on when we get into conversations around sales. And we tend to slip into the mode of what we believe a salesperson would or should do. And we just kind of plow through it without being fully present in the moment and realizing who, like you said, we're talking to. Are we talking to a woman trying to buy a car? Are we talking to a new entrepreneur who's just put everything on the line and needs to feed their families? Are we talking with an executive in a company who just got this job and needs to prove themselves? We have to be cognizant of that. And it's hard when we're wrapped up in our own heads.
Definitely, yeah. Well, and as you said, there's a reason why I'm going back 4 sales jobs to my examples to make myself sound good. Because in car sales, an executive too gets very linear, and that's easier because if someone walks in a lot, they're basically in a fairly small box of a car buyer. Whereas if I'm selling coaching services or selling marketing, advertising, and especially if you're doing it over the phone or over Zoom and you have much less to work with, it can be a lot tougher to. And what's the next question to ask? You kind of you freeze up, and you think,
kind of like dating, right?
I don't next question. Let me just say something.
Yeah, I often use a metaphor that sales is a lot like dating. Similar pressures, fears of rejections, emotions are running high, trying to be focused on the other person and not talking about ourselves too much, not trying to be pushy and aggressive and take too big of a step before the time is right. All very much like what happens in sales. And it's interesting, like I often make the metaphor, like, you wouldn't walk up to a person in a bar, hand them your business card and say, okay, let's go get married. There's going to be a few conversations between there and there. And we sometimes try to rush into it. And so it's not a trend, like we're using the car sales metaphor, which is ironic because when most people think of sales, they think of icky, pushy, used car salesman. But if you think in the context of, you're going to have a long-term relationship with some of the clients that you're working with, then you really want to make sure that you're starting that relationship off on the right foot, that it's going to be a good fit for both of you. Because, if you're a small business entrepreneur or a solopreneur, the pain of having a client who's just not a good fit, who's, you're not meshing, you're banging heads. those are the kinds of things that you want to avoid, because it's going to suck the life out of you, out of your business, and you're not going to end up with a good result. So having a sales process that is as much about disqualification as qualification is very important to make sure that you're making the right fit and having a good relationship to start with.
Yeah, and that's especially important in things coaching and those kinds of relationship-based things.
Yeah, I often say to people that come to me for coaching is one of the decisions you have to make is, do you really want to talk to me almost every single day?
Yeah.
And that's the decision that I also have to make. Like everything else aside, if we can't look forward to talking to each other every other day for the next 3 to 6 months, then this is probably not a good idea.
Yep. Yeah, and that's in some ways that's why I liked selling cars so much, because it's a car's a car basically when you get right down to it. If you buy a Forte or a Civic or a Corolla or a Cruise or whatever, they're all basically cars. They'll get you around. They're all similarly reliable, similarly safe. And if you make a bad decision, it's not like if you make the wrong decision with life insurance and then you discover your family discovers after you die you screwed it up, or you make the wrong decision with a $4,000 coaching program and it's the wrong coach and they can't teach you what you need to know. If you make the wrong decision with a car, you are mildly less satisfied with your car than you would be otherwise.
Right. Or buying a house. That's another big one that you can live with regret for a long time. Yeah,
but so as a car salesman, I was never worried about, is this really the right fit? Now, if I'm pushing them into an SUV and they need a sedan, then it's the wrong fit. But if they're the right class, then I never had to worry about, I'm pushing them into a Forte, but they really want a Civic. They all get about the same gas mileage. They all cost about the same. They're all similar levels of services. So I could comfortably say, buy this car because you also get to buy it from me. So it's good. Go. And then other things like coaching, like business services, then you really think, is this the best for them? I think it's where you can kind of get into your own head too. Be like, well, maybe it's the best, maybe it's not, but maybe they should, but maybe they should consider someone else. Especially too empathetic with your customer.
Well, if you also think about how this impacts your ability to get referrals. I know like Matt Ward's going to be doing their keynote for Conference 21, and he talks about referrals and being able to care for customers. And if you think in terms of how you sell is going to set up the relationship that you have with this person, it's not going to just impact that relationship, but all of the referrals that come afterwards. Like even if we go back to the selling cars metaphor, you could sell them this or that, and there's not a ton of difference between the two models. But if the experience that they have with you isn't exemplary, if they're not delighted with it, it's going to be a lot harder for you to then get referrals for people to send to them. Like I know when I bought my car, I had such a great experience that whenever someone said, hey, where should I go? Who do you know at a dealership that's not going to screw me over? I would say, go talk to Tracy over here. And that's what you want as an entrepreneur. That's what you want as a salesperson, is that if you can have an experience with that buyer that they're delighted by, and not that it's always going to be perfect, but it's how you respond to even mistakes that still gives them that they can trust you, they will tell the world about you, whether good or bad. And that's going to impact your ability to get referrals, and that's going to impact your ability to scale and grow your business.
That's huge. That's great. So it's great to have you and be able to share you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, podcast and this. Then you'll be, of course, at Conference 21, which I'm down here again, Conference21.com, and that is the 20th and 21st of 2021. Tickets at Conference21.com. And of course, your website is unboundgrowth.com. And so before you go, are there any final things you want to share about how people can get in touch with you and who should reach out to you?
Absolutely. I'm actually working on writing a book this year. I'm writing for entrepreneurs who are struggling with trying to get that first customer or next customer, and they might not realize that what's really getting in their way is that mindset and belief. So I'm in the process of writing that book now, and would love to talk with other entrepreneurs out there about what they're seeing, what they're struggling with, what they're hoping to accomplish that I might be able to include in that. You can reach out to me through the website at unboundgrowth.com, or you can also find me on LinkedIn or here on Facebook.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you everyone who is watching. I did see a couple of comments, but I'm not sure what they were talking about because they're talking about retail stores. But thank you for the commenter, and I'll maybe find out later who it was and what they were talking about. They can come to Conference 21 and bring their questions there as well. And with that, I will sign us off of Facebook.
Bye, everybody.